Legends abound that tell of an ancient world that once thrived on this earth, but which perished by means of a great flood. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh and the legend of the lost continent of Atlantis are just two. Variations of this story exist in the folklore of all people, evidence that the disaster left a lasting impression on the collective memory of mankind. But only the Bible gives an unembellished account of why God destroyed the world. The 6th chapter of Genesis tells us that spirit sons of God, angels, materialized as men in order to procreate with women. The Bible says that they chose as many wives for themselves as they wanted. The result of the unnatural union between angels and sinful women was the birth of a freakish race of violent giants called the Nephilim. The account says that they were the mighty ones of old, the men of fame. Evidently, the exploits of the rebellious angels and the Nephilim are reflected in Greek mythological tales of violent giants and demigods. Under the influence of the rebellious angels, the world became ruined in the sight of God. In spite of the prevailing violence and immorality, Jesus referred to the fact that persons living in the pre-flood world were eating, drinking, and marrying, and took no note. And all the while Noah was sounding the warning of God's coming judgment and building an enormous ark according to God's specifications for the preservation of mankind and the animals and the birds of the earth. Once the ark was ready, then it began, and for 40 days and 40 nights the earth was deluged, and the world perished beneath the angry waters. But God caused the mountains to ascend and the seabeds to deepen, and the waters gradually receded, and the world was given a fresh start. But just as the flood has left an indelible impression on the collective memory of mankind, so too the earth still bears the scars of that great catastrophe. The Grand Canyon is an example of the scope of the flood. The rim of the canyon is 10 miles across and 1 mile deep. When viewed from the top, the mighty Colorado River appears as a tiny trickle at the bottom of the canyon. Obviously, no river on Earth is 10 miles wide. The raging waters that once sliced through the sediment had to have been oceanic in scale. But where could all the water have come from? The Bible explains. When the symbolic 6 days of creation began, the earth already existed as a formless waste covered with a shoreless sea. On the second creative day, God commanded that there should occur a division of the waters into an earthly ocean and a heavenly ocean, with an atmospheric expanse in between. The Hebrew word translated as deluge literally means heavenly ocean. We should not suppose, though, that this great mass of water was in the form of a cloud vapor, or that it could be duplicated by the natural cycle of evaporation and condensation. The heavenly ocean existed as a unique creation of God, perhaps suspended high up in the lower regions of outer space. We hear a lot these days about the so-called greenhouse effect because of the buildup of certain atmospheric gases. Scientists know that the Earth once had a uniform semi-tropical climate, and no doubt the heavenly ocean that once surrounded the Earth produced a pronounced greenhouse effect, creating the environment for the Earth to be covered in a dense blanket of vegetation and for the animals to thrive. But when the deluge collapsed, shattering the insulating greenhouse ceiling, parts of the earth were plunged into a deep freeze, creating an instantaneous ice age. Great masses of the floodwaters became locked in ice, lowering the sea level and creating land bridges between continents. The existence of land bridges solves the mysterious migrations of animals and peoples thousands of years ago. The flood buried massive amounts of animal carcasses and vegetation, which has long since decayed to form fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. The fossilized imprints of millions of plants and animals also testify to the great cataclysm, since fossils are produced only when plants and animals are buried before they can decay or are devoured. The petrified trees in the Arizona desert are evidence that a forest was buried under tons of earth before the trees could even rot, only to be later exposed to the light of day by erosion. But Earth's story of the flood is not just written down in stone. Siberia has yielded tons of ivory tusked and a few nearly perfectly preserved flash-frozen carcasses of the woolly mammoth. It is reported that some of the beasts still had grass in their mouths when they were apparently suddenly swept away and entombed in icy muck up until modern times. The Genesis record informs us that as the flood waters receded, the floating ark came to rest on Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat is located in eastern Turkey, close to Iran. Although the perpetually snow-covered mountain has been explored by numerous ark-hunting expeditions over the last 100 years, so far the mountain has not yielded up its secret treasure. But what happened to the rebellious angels? Did they drown in the flood along with their wives and sons? No. The once faithful sons of God dematerialized back into the spirit realm, and they are now known as the demons. Under their king, Satan the devil, the demons are the actual unseen rulers of this world. Their insidious influence is reflected in popular culture that glorifies superheroes and promotes magic and violence and sexual promiscuity of all kinds. As a result of their misleading influence, the world is self-absorbed with the everyday cares and attractions of the world, eating and drinking and marrying, just as in the days of Noah. But Satan knows that his days are numbered. Just as the watery deluge was suspended in heaven over the earth, the Christian apostle Peter informs us that the heavens and the earth that are now are stored up for fire, reserved until the day of God and the destruction of ungodly men. A day in which the very elements will melt and the heavens will pass away with a hissing noise. And the wicked world and ungodly men and their demonic masters will be no more, just as in the days of Noah.